Hello, everyone, and welcome. Happy New Year for the end of year stream that I'm doing. Also, I need a haircut, but we're just going to ignore that. I read a good amount of books this year, but a top 10 would be about a third of them. And then I was like, okay, I'll do a tier list then. And then I was like, what if I do it live? And I actually have not one, but two tier lists for you all. One for everything I read, one for everything I reread with a twist. And also this way, I like that as I do the tier list, you guys can yell at me for saying things that are frankly obscene, ridiculous, and maybe just flat out wrong. Happy New Year, Sam. Mr. Samwise. So that being said, I don't actually have two monitors. So when I have like this actual tier list open, I can't see the comments. So I'm going to have to remember to go back and forth because I don't feel like doing some like monstrosity thing where I split the screen on two monitors. So I unfortunately fell for one of the classic blunders, which is that I arranged these chronologically in the order that I read them. And now if I click presentation mode, it will reset the order. So I'm trying to decide, do I get rid of, so sorry, you're all seeing the ad on the right. It's the way it is. So this is all the books I read for the first time this year, in order. And we started off with the TBR competition. You'll notice that the bottom is mediocre. Got very lucky in avoiding books that I thought were like bad this year. It helped to not read as many books and for like a higher percentage of the books than normal to be from authors that I already liked. Like, every Vorkosigan book on here was like a pretty safe call. Also a bunch of new releases, which we'll get to the New Year release. And Happy New Year to both of you. This is, in fact, my most important title. We'll see if Vin gets mad at me for yapping and not paying attention to her during the course of the stream. So, without further ado, The Book Thief. The Book Thief was pretty awesome. I'm going to put it in very, very good. It has such a cool vibe with Death as the narrator. Definitely can be like emotionally gut punching. It has this thing where like, I don't know if any of the characters stand out as like, that's one of like the best written characters, but the sense of like the characterization in general in terms of like how they all fit in the setting is really good. It also has this weird thing where like how the descriptive language reminds me of like my sister's descriptive language, which is probably because The Book Thief was one of her favorite books growing up. These ads are going to really tilt me. Should I just go out of order? Helshad? You know what? Screw it. Let's just go random order. I will put The Book Thief back, though. I will find it. Very, very good. I've decided I will not let Tier Maker advertise to you all while watching this stream. It's too many advertisements. So we're skipping straight to a civil campaign because it starts with A. Now you might legitimately be like, hey, shouldn't 11/22/63 be first? And I may have deliberately made it not first by writing out 11/22/63 when I named the image. A civil campaign is from the Vorkosigan saga and is absolutely, without a doubt, a book of the year contender. It is one of my favorite books in the Vorkosigan saga. It is just an absolute delight to read. It might be bejeweled at the peak of her ridiculous character writing powers where it's POV hopping and just like every single person feels so human, but also like each one is like, I've never read this person before, but they definitely are a person. And it has some of the funniest scenes that I read all year. Is there a weird thing with my... No, it's just... And the bottom left, it looks like there's a random gray band in the middle of my face. Anyway, next, we have A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which I thought was a reread when I started it. And this has three, like the Hedge Knight, the Sworn Sword, and the Mystery Knight. And I definitely had only read the Hedge Knight. I definitely had never read the Sworn Sword or the Mystery Knight. Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is George being like, yes, I can write a lawful good protagonist. Do I want to put it... It was really good. Was it... I definitely like The Book Thief quite a bit more. I'm not sure if I want to put it in the same tier as The Book Thief and just have these be like very ends of the tier, Yeah, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is pretty awesome. No, yeah, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is pretty awesome. We can put it higher than that. We can put it in very, very good. It does definitely have a lot of George being like, hey, by the way, I'm now going to have this person think about Westerosi history. And I'm like, George, that only works because I already care about Westerosi history, but fine, I'll allow. You just wanted an excuse to tell me about this war, but I'll allow it because Dunk is awesome. TV show looks really cool. You gotta love it when you watch a trailer and like so many scenes are just like, that's a scene from the book. I'm glad I didn't become enemies with David. And this is very good news. Okay, next is All That We See or Seem by Ken Liu, first of the new releases. This has not been the most well-received of new releases. I mean, I've seen a lot of people give it like 2 stars. I enjoyed it, like fine and mediocre. Let's change this to pretty good, I guess, because I feel like I need a tier for pretty good, I guess. Like it was compelling plot-wise. I enjoyed the protagonist. It does have this one aspect that I think legitimately hurts it is it's set in like a cyberpunk future where like a bunch of people use like AI and stuff. And because in real life, when people talk about using AI, they're almost always incredibly annoying. Sorry to people who might be talking, but this is just true. This doesn't mean you are annoying if you're part of that group. But on average, when people talk about like, oh, but what if I just use AI to do this? It's just like, yeah, whatever, dude. And so when that is the normal way of approaching things, and so many people are like, I have this problem. It's like, well, I'm going to use like AI in this way and AI in this way to solve it. It kind of just feels annoying because of the connection to real life now. I wonder if this same book came out like 3 years ago, if it would be way less annoying in that regard. I quite liked the final act. You know what? This is just, what are we doing? Can I ban you? No, I won't ban. Well, I can ban you. I definitely can. It says right there, ban user and delete their comments. It also says put user in timeout and delete comment. I'm not going to, but I want you to know in my head I did. And like, I think Ken has some really creative problem solving and stuff. This is just like the standard for Ken Liu is very high. This is going to be a theme for the new releases where I'm just like, yeah, they were good. It's just like my bar for that author is very high. So like, but you know, it's no Speaking Bones, which would have won Book of the Year very easily. Next up, a book that is much better than pretty good, I guess, is Blackwater by Michael McDowell. This is kind of 6 books. I could have stat padded and been like, I actually read more books this year, but I read it as 1 book. For Book of the Year contender, I'm just going to not put them in order for now, but Blackwater absolutely is a member of Book of the Year contender. Blackwater is really good. So Blackwater is slightly interesting. And a lot of the time, like when I'm reading something that's going to be a Book of the Year contender, I know I really like it, like instantly. Like, you know, page 6, I'll be like, well, this rules. Blackwater, like the first 100 pages are good, but I did not know if it would be like, this is like solid 100 pages in, or would be a Book of the Year contender 100 pages in. And alas, it is a Book of the Year contender. For those who don't know, this is it is technically considered a horror book, but it's really a family saga of the Kasky family who lives in some like town in the southern states with some mild horror elements. The inciting incident is their town is flooded and a strange lady shows up who definitely isn't a river monster. Don't worry about it. She's definitely not a river monster, but it's totally fine. And you follow this family throughout the course of this character's life. I think, like, Blackwater, the thing I give it that stands out to me is, do you know the feeling when, like, an author is being deliberately emotionally manipulative? Because, like, the authors are being deliberately emotionally manipulative, right? Like, they want you to have certain emotions for the book to work. But when you feel like they're trying to push you to an emotion, it's like unsatisfying. And it's like, no, author. I just want you to tell me what happened, and we'll pretend you're not trying to manipulate me into feeling a specific set of emotions. Yeah, exactly. She's not a river monster, so it's totally fine. Everyone, don't worry about it. Totally safe. No moral or safety concerns for having her around. Anyway, you kind of want it to feel like the author's just being like, this is what happened. And oops, it accidentally achieved the emotional response I wanted. My bad. And this book might manage that as well as any other book I have read, where the narration is almost like so straightforwardly feeling like it's just telling you what happens, with like, it's got like a third person narrator, and it very much feels like the narrator is not trying to bias you in any way, and yet everyone still really ends up feeling certain emotions towards people who are legitimately extremely morally dubious, and like they still end up supporting people who don't logically make sense. And I am people in this case, where I was like, you really just told me about what this person has done that's really horribly, very straightforwardly, but like you just kind of didn't, like, it doesn't make sense that I feel this emotion, but you managed it without being emotionally manipulative at all. So anyway, Michael McDowell, tippy top tier character writer. Yeah, Dara, you would probably like Live Ship. It's also, I know, like right now, for like new books, like if it has a slow world building, like this doesn't have a world building curve at all because it's just set in America. But who knows? Maybe that's a crazier place than anywhere else. Who knows? But it just is like a very, very good character writer. It's like the third person omniscient, and it reminds you, like, it does show and tell, where like telling for character writing sucks when the author tells you a character is all these things. Like the author will be like, and then in came this character, and they're like so smart, but like kind of evil and mischievous, and they have anger issues. And then you read the book, and like the author tells you that they have those feats, but like the character doesn't do smart things, and they don't do angry things, and they don't do mischievous things. And you're like, okay, so you didn't actually take the work to like build the character. You just told me that. There will literally be scenes where Michael McDowell, like the narrator, will be like, and then this character came in. Here are their character traits or whatever. But it works because then for the rest of the novel, they show you those character traits as well. If I do top 10 favorite character writers, which might be one of my next videos, so it'll in the next several months or years, Michael McDowell is going to be on that list. So anyway, Blackwater, extremely awesome. I mean, also Louis McMaster Bujold is going to be on this list. She's so good. Anyway, speaking of which, Captain Vorpatrol's Alliance by Louis McMaster Bujold. This is also one of the funniest Bujold books. This has got to be in like very, very good. It's kind of it's a perspective we don't normally get, who's normally been a side character, and we get it from their perspective, and it's such a delight. And it's kind of got this moment that I think is really fun, where like halfway through, you're like, wait, what is the book? Like, it feels like this is getting to an end. And then it's kind of, you get like well, never mind. There's conflict. It's hard to talk about the Vorkoskin books in detail because they're all like book 20 or something. Speaking of which, Cryoburn by Louis McMaster Bujold. Cryoburn, I might like more than The Book Thief. I think I do. Cryoburn is definitely like top third Vorkosigan for me. I think maybe, man, the standard for top third Vorkosigan is actually so high. Maybe it isn't. It's got Bujold. Okay, different ad blocker. I've just been using the same old ad blocker for like literally a decade. I mean, I have an ad blocker. It just doesn't work on a lot of websites. A lot of websites just get around it. Anyway, Bujold does some in media res, some different point of views. It's generally a good time. We're moving on. There's too many Vorkoskin books. I can't talk about them all in detail. With Daughter of the Empire, this was part of the book TBR picking competition, but it was a book I was interested in anyways. It was one I had pretty high expectations for, and it's between, like, I liked it. Maybe I quite liked it. The protagonist is really cool. Like, you get a protagonist put in this situation, and it's just one of those where it's like you see this protagonist be clever, and kind of some of the fun of the book is her outsmarting a bunch of people. I remember just like not being super engaged with some other stuff where it's kind of like Mara is so awesome, but I didn't find the rest of the book that awesome. There was also, I felt some weird plot stuff. I don't know. I don't remember it that well. It was too long ago. I'm putting it in quite liked it because Mara rules. Speaking of books that rule, guess what? Diplomatic Immunity, my man, Miles Forkosigan, the GOAT. I'm just going to put it next to Captain Vorpatrol's Alliance. I think I literally gave these like the same. I think on my like book ranking or whatever, these are literally adjacent to each other. It's hard for me to pick which one I like more. Dogs of War by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Rex is definitely a good boy. This one, like, I kind of went in reading it only knowing that people would say Rex is a good dog and that it's about a dog. And I was expecting it to be I was not expecting the legal drama. Now, a significant part of the book is an legal drama, but that's because this book is like 5 books. This is what, like, Tchaikovsky covers so much ground in his books where it's one of those where it's like, you know, he definitely this could have been his outline for like a 6-book series where each book has like a distinctly different role for Rex, but he's like, it's 1 book and it's not even that long of a book. Like it's pretty normal size. But all the parts were good. I definitely didn't like it quite as much as like Children of Time. But it was still, I have too many things in very, very good. What if I remove a very? There's too much between very good and quite liked it. We're just going very good. And then, okay, we're editing the tiers as we go. Maybe I need to do this. No, let's do this. Let's do this. This is now the line. These were both borderline. Okay, Dreams Underfoot by Charles DeLint. Is my second book by Charles DeLint. Last year I read Memory and Dream, which would be up in Book of the Year contender. Dreams Underfoot is not in Book of the Year contender for me. I mean, this happens pretty often, I think, with short story collections where they're just not quite as consistently hits. Some of them in there are really good. Do I like this more than Knight of the Seven Kingdoms? Probably not. I think it's very good. I think I quite liked it, and we're going to put it again. Dogs of War or Dreams Underfoot. Wow, they're so different. Charles Underfoot is very like, Charles DeLint is very like Sense of Wondery, where, yeah, Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is very good. Charles DeLint is very good at like the magical elements that are just like Sense of Wonder. He does, I think, have some moderately rough dialogue at times from what I've seen. I'm putting it above Dogs of War. Okay. 11/22/63. This was the first book. No, it wasn't. Book Thief was the first book. One of the first books that I read this year because it was part of the TBR competition, and it is going straight into Book of the Year contender with A Civil Campaign and Blackwater. This was my 3rd Stephen King book. I read The Stand in like 2021, and I was like, and everyone before that was like, The Stand is the best. And then I read The Stand, and everyone kept being, no. The Stand, not even close to one of the best King books. And I was like, well, no one told me this before. So then I had trust issues. But then eventually I read Shawshank last year, which was really good. And then Ben took this for me. And oh my God, it's good. And I'm not just saying that because the protagonist's name is Jake. This is a great example of a book that is amazing instantly. This is like page 3. I'm like, yeah, this goes hard. This is awesome. And then it keeps going awesome for the entire book. It's one of the best premises that like I've read. And it's one of those where it's like, when you pitch it, you don't have to be like, yeah, the author's really good at this. You can just be like, say the premise, which for those of you, I'm assuming who know, is like a dude inherits a time machine that like only goes back to a single place. And yeah, is like, what if we do some history bending? Good luck, have fun. Yeah, and then it's also while he's doing like he goes back in time with a specific goal, but because it's enough years, he ends up like living a life, and you get these slice of life stuff and him trying to achieve his goal, and they interfere with each other, and it's just so good. And the like conflict between those, because as goals they end up being like not directly contradictory, but each makes the other way harder. Truly excellent. Falling Free by Louis McMaster Bujold. This is her prequel novella. It's got like a 3.6 on Goodreads. Anyway, I quite like it. Got the engineer main. I might even. I think I read this in like a day. It's got an engineer main character who, guess what? Bujold writes another main character, and like Bujold is one of those authors who I think might have been like is actually better at character voice than I'd normally give her credit, because she writes so much from one character. Like Curse of Chalion is all one POV, and then most of her books are only one POV. But whenever you get a new POV, they just have such a strong internal dialogue, again, as like a unique human that is distinct from any other human that I have read about. Some stuff in there is kind of weird, but really interesting sci-fi stuff too. This is one of her more interesting, like most of her sci-fi books are primarily character story driven that have sci-fi stuff going on. This is one of the more interesting sci-fi stuff. I think Cryoburn is actually the most interesting from a sci-fi topic perspective. I mean, I think this literally came up where I saw like the sci-fi thing being explored in Cryoburn, like as a thing people were looking into. And I was like, that's just the plot of Cryoburn. The people who think this is a good idea need to go read Cryoburn. I've never known men's coming up. And then we have the last Vorkoskin book, which is Gentleman Jolet and the Red Queen. Now, this is not my least favorite Vorkoskin book, but it's pretty comfortably my least favorite Vorkoskin novel. But it's still good. It gets us into a good end point for the series. It goes back to a character who's been like kind of a side character for a while and was more important early on, and is kind of like, hey, yeah, they actually had interesting stuff going on, by the way. You shouldn't just assume people don't have interesting stuff going on in the background. But at the end of the day, this is a book about a dude who I didn't know before this book making a career decision. And I don't actually feel that strongly on which career decision I want him to make. I'm like, there are clear pros and cons of both. Now, when some other main Vorkoskin characters show up, it immediately gets several standard deviations more compelling. But some of the stuff early in this book, I was like, I have to be honest, Lois, I kind of don't care. Yeah, so this was because the person who co-founded the SFU book club with me ended up reading this, and that was an interesting book club discussion. Okay, next up, I Who Have Never Known Men, absolute banger, not quite book of the year contender, but such a good novel. We also did this for the book club. It manages to like, it doesn't really have that much resolution or plot or conflict or reveals. But I guess those things are for nerds because it still rules. It is kind of just about the main character's struggle against despair in a situation that is like completely ridiculous, and just like trying to not despair about that being completely ridiculous. It's so compelling. It's so interesting. Honestly, we don't even need plot. Plot is for nerds. Which brings us to another new release. Second new release on here. I think I've only talked about two. Owls of the Emberdark by Brandon Sanderson, which I would say I quite liked. So, Isles of the Emberdark is a continuation of the Sixth of Dusk novella. It's got really, really cool world building. Like, right now, the Cosmere's in kind of a weird place where, like, with the newest books, we're kind of between fantasy and sci-fi. So, like, some of the fantasy people are like, why is this sci-fi? Here we see sci-fi Cosmere, and it's so cool. Like, I just can't emphasize enough how much it's so cool, and I'm so excited. And Dusk is an awesome protagonist. Now, I've gone back and read some past Sanderson stuff, so I'm pretty sure this isn't just my taste evolving. Some of the writing in this is tough. Some of the humor is tough. Like, some of the dialogue is just tough. Like, there's just a higher concentration than usual. And Sanderson, like, I don't read for the prose, but there's a higher concentration of usual of me reading a sentence and being like, man, that was a clunky ass sentence. And when Sanderson is writing well, I kind of don't think about the writing and I end up flying through the pages. And this kind of takes me out of flying through the pages. Starling was cool too. Man, Sanderson, like, you gotta get, people are thinking about their own character arcs way too much, man. Like, I get people might self-reflect upon how they have changed sometimes. This is too much self-reflecting about how much they've changed. You gotta stop, please. Anyway. But man, Dusk is so cool, and the Cosmere and the world building was so cool. So I still quite liked it, but I'm concerned. We're going back to Vorkosigan. We have Komar. This was the first Vorkosigan book I read after a break. It has Miles in a new role. The first half I thought was good, but not stand out for Vorkosigan. But the second half ruled. It introduced Ekaterin, who you're going to see when I do as one of the nominees for Character of the Year. It's going in very good, but behind A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Yeah. I mean, Fitz is not comparable to Dusk. Like, there are levels here. Lies Weeping by Glenn Cook. This is another new release. This was the latest book of The Black Company, and it was a book I was pretty worried about. Like, it's been a long time since Glenn Cook wrote in The Black Company, and the last book he wrote in The Black Company was Soldiers Live, which is just, like, to me, clearly my favorite book in The Black Company, and one of the best endings to a series that I've ever read. Like, if I was just like final beats, it's making the top 5. Yes, Derry, Assassin's Fate, final scene is 1. But, after Assassin's Fate, I'm like, Soldiers Live, final scene could be 2. I don't know if it would be 2. Maybe Lord of the Rings. Speaking Bones. Whatever. It could be 2. And I was just like, what if Glenn Cook forgot how to write The Black Company? And Glenn Cook did not forget how to write The Black Company. It is still my least favorite book in The Black Company, but only barely. It's very close to not. And The Black Company, like, before that, had a very high floor for me. I like Glenn Cook's quirks. Now, it's got two writers. These are all in-world texts, and they've got, like, 2 analysts who are writing the annals of The Black Company. And in this case, it's like 2 people who know each other and clearly care about each other, but are like constantly talking shit about each other and the other person's narration. And I found it hilarious. It was very seamlessly done. But hello, sorry about your connection, and goodbye, Derry. We'll see you later. I will give Vin neck scratches, or she'll murder me. But this does, like, the actual plot of the book doesn't really start until you don't really know what the plot of the book is until there's very little left in the book. And then the book ends mid-scene. Like, I can't emphasize enough, mid-scene. Like, this is the equivalent of if Tolkien was like, okay, I'm writing Lord of the Rings, and the publishers were like, you have to split this up into 3 books. And he was like, okay, well, if I split them exactly into thirds, like the end of Fellowship ends up being like mid fight scene with like Aragorn or something. And he just it was like, yeah, there's one, I think some people started getting the arc today. It has a terrible title. It's called They Cry, whatever. Lies weeping, they cry. There's a theme. But yeah, it literally ends like mid action scene. Like this would be the equivalent of if it was like one orc tried to kill Aragorn and Aragorn like went to stab them, and then like another orc went to stab them, and then the book just ends. It's wild. But it's so funny, and Glenn Cook just writes well. So I quite liked it about this much. Our Share of Night by Marika Henriquez, recommended by my sister. This is allegedly it's a horror book, but it's also just a fantasy book. It is split into a few parts. It's about, what is it about? It's about a massive cult running a bunch of stuff somewhere, like one of the super rich families actually doing a bunch of like sacrifices and magic-y death stuff. And they have a dude like for their exploring their religion that's like the medium, and they learn a bunch of stuff through their medium, but it kind of sucks. And it starts like from the perspective, it's centered around the relationship between a father and a son. And it's like a dad who, like, if you ask him, he'd be like, no, I love my son. And it's like, no, you're kind of an abusive father. Like, I'm sorry. And he doesn't realize that he's an abusive father. And those two characters are really interesting. It's split into like 5 parts. There's like a reasonably long part, and then a second, and then like a super short one, like 2 pages. That's really disturbing. But like well-written disturbing. And then there's a third part that's really good. And then there's a fourth part that I found pretty boring, where it was like, hey, a prequel, this person experimented in college bunch. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't care how much acid you did. I actually want to know what happens. I would like plot answers, please. And I kind of took a long time to read that middle part, and I was forgetting that like the book was awesome. And I was like, wait, do I not like this book that much? And then I got to the next part, and it was immediately really awesome again. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember this book is awesome. And thus I quite like it, but definitely, okay, Dogs of War should be higher. But less, no, Dogs of War is better than this. But less than Komar and Dogs of War. Revenge of the Sith. Hey, it's a book I don't have to worry about spoiling. Yes, Star Wars. By the way, I believe Harry Potter, Star Wars, and maybe Lord of the Rings. Although, I've now run into like 2 people in the last month who were completely unspoiled for Lord of the Rings and interested in watching Lord of the Rings. What is going on? Anyway, Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith, written by Matthew Stover, is quite good. It makes, like, there's a lot of stuff in the movie that works conceptually, but ends up being kind of clunky, that Stover just makes work so much better. He makes, like, there's the entire thing where, like, the push and pull between Palpatine and the Jedi Council, and Anakin being like, how could I not be a master? But in this, like, Stover fixes that, and it actually like makes sense that Anakin is really upset about being on the council and not being a master. It, I think, makes the Obi-Wan and Anakin relationship work. The biggest thing it improves is like it actually, like in the movie, Anakin is just like, but I have so much respect for Palpatine. And it's like, where did that come from? And that actually feels like a real thing. And it, like, he has the push and pull between his like 4 loyalties: loyalty to like his friend Obi-Wan, loyalty to Padme, his wife, loyalty to the Jedi Council, and loyalty to Palpatine. And in the movie, like, kind of all 4 of those loyalties are like, but are you though? And they're kind of all make more sense here. But Stover did change like this, one of the single good lines in the movie Revenge of the Sith, and for that he does not have my forgiveness, which is like in the movie, one of the only good lines of dialogue that was written, that George Lucas wrote for these movies. was Padme being like, so this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. And Stover was like, nah, this is how liberty dies, with like theater, with cheering and applause. Now, he did literally rewrite all of the dialogue, which is good. Like the conversations, a lot of the same meanings are covered, but he rewrote all of the dialogue, like, from scratch. Anyway, Revenge of the Sith, I quite liked it. We're putting it like here. Another new release time, Shadows Upon Time. Shadows Upon Time. This is true. Also, Stover is just obsessed with the martial arts. I could tell this already from Heroes Die, but I was like, leg kicks. Let's go. We love me a leg kick. But so many people are just like, okay, and then I use my Form 3 Sarisu to counter his Form 4 Ataru. It's like, you can tell what Stover is interested in. Shadows Upon Time, the final book of the Sun Eater. This was poised to be my book of the year. This was way less competition than last year. If it'd come out like this Quiet Gods came out last year, no chance. We had perhaps the stars. We had it was a stacked year. This was its chance. Unfortunately, it was not to be. I still think Shadows Upon Time is very good, but it is my second least favorite book in the Sun Eater series. So it has some massive pros and cons. It has like most of the Sun Eater pros, but it just has a few non-trivial cons that I just don't have for the other Sun Eater books. The world building, set pieces, writing, scope are all still bonkers and like insanely creative. Hadrian is also going to be a nominee for Character of the Year. I think his development over the books is so strong, where he's very, very long-lived. Like, this isn't a spoiler. This is its retrospective, and Hadrian very early on will be like, yeah, this was like 1,500 years ago, fam. Which doesn't mean he's 1,500, because there's like cryo freeze for like traveling. But very old lad, and he's just like, he's had in some way, like, this is the most Hadrian has ever been to Empire of Silence Hadrian, and yet in some ways this feels the most true to Empire of Silence Hadrian of like any of the Hadrian books. This also has some of the strongest side character stuff, especially with the goat William. Yes, cat, meow. I have been ignoring you for far too long. And then it just has a pretty large continuity error. Like, there's just a conversation, like a super like dramatic, important conversation at the end of a chapter. And then everyone just forgets that conversation happened. Like, this was only one example, so obviously it's not the same degree, but like, this was some Game of Thrones season 7 type shit. Where it's like, you know, two characters talk about something really important, and then like everyone just forgets that happened. I am extremely hyped for Rockio's new series, because I think Rockio characterizes people in their own perspective like way better than he does from other perspectives. And this is going to be multi-perspective. And post-Trojan War inspired fantasy sounds awesome. And like, you know, it's very noteworthy that this is my, like, by Rockio standards, this is a mix. Yeah, I think it's 35 or 39. I can find it. We're doing it live. Okay, well, it's not 35, because I just like to note, I just opened this book to the first page of chapter 36 while trying to find 35 or 36. Like, I just want to say I might be the GOAT for that. Like, I don't know how I pulled that off. I just got lucky. But, okay, it's 38. Yeah, it's the conversation at the end of chapter 39. He doesn't just ignore it. He specifically says he hasn't told this person information, when this chapter is directly telling that person information on multiple occasions. And it's like really important information. And he thinks about how hard it is that he can't tell anyone on multiple occasions. Like, it's pretty bad. Like, it's actually a pretty bad continuity error. Like, I actually just can't believe that it's in the book. Anyway, that being said, like, I can complain about this all I want. There's also a retcon that at first I was really mad about, but then they made the retcon work. But like, none of this overruns the fact that while reading it, I still really liked every chapter, basically. So even though I have the criticisms, like, I still thought it was very good. The clickbait thing for me to do would be like, Shadows Upon Time ruined Sun Eater, and then like make a video and be like, and then people would be like, oh, thank you for being honest and being negative. But it's like, actually, that would be the clickbait thing too. Anyway, I still really liked it, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about my criticisms. Like, when I read it, I couldn't talk to it for anyone, and I was kind of like, wait, am I just like missing something? I'm pretty sure I'm not missing something. Okay, we're moving on to Stoner by John Williams. Stoner is a book of the year contender. There's someone who watches a lot of my videos who keeps telling me to read Stoner. Yeah, bro, you were right. I should have read Stoner. Stoner is so good. John Williams is such a good character writer. I know it's about a dude living a normal life. It is like, it always sounds boring when other people speak about it. He has an efficiency of characterization that is, I think, borderline unmatched. It is like tippity top tier, where there's not that many like named characters in this book, but like, not just every character's existence is plot relevant, every character's personality is plot relevant. Where if you take any character who, let's say, has like more than 2 scenes and you tweak my personality, like, the plot of the novel directly changes. So it's got that like character driven, where all of the plot and conflict is driven by who the characters are, while also feeling incredibly efficient. And it's just like this guy who makes a lot of like not very good decisions. Like, sometimes when he should stand his ground, he's a pushover. When he should just concede, he stands his ground. He kind of succeeds at everything he's trying to do, but it's never like rewarding to the same degree. And yet, like, he's still like, it's still kind of a novel about the bits of happiness that he can secure. John Williams is just such a good writer. And Stoner is so good. And yes, he will also be on my top 10 character writers. The Devils by Mr. Joe Abercrombie. We have yet another new release. And The Devils, I quite liked it. Yeah, The Devils is good. I feel like I'm actually underselling Bejeweled, and I'm like, surely a below average Bejeweled book can't be like better than these books. But actually, if you ask me, like, it probably is. The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. This is one of those where it's like, if you like Joe Abercrombie, it would be really like, it's Joe Abercrombie. It's very Joe Abercrombie. It is a gang of really morally ambiguous, like, not ambiguous, actually. Some of their moralities are very clear. Morally dubious ragtag bunch who get unlucky and struggle all the time. And Jakob of the Thorn is awesome. And I don't think I gave him a nomination for Character of the Year, but that's just because he doesn't show up again. If he showed up more, he would absolutely be a nomination. Now, yeah, I mean, one problem with Sharp Ends is it's just not that good. So that's kind of one thing that holds it back compared to other Joe Abercrombie. But I haven't read his other short story collection. I just don't think he's a very good short story writer, in that his short stories just mostly feel like chapter 1 of a novel that just then doesn't continue. And it's just like, okay, this wasn't a short story, Joe. Like, I don't think. But I think you should read A Little Hatred, not The Devils, because like A Little Hatred is so good. The Devils does, I think, have some slightly repetitive character beats. This is one of those where it's tough when you get authors who write more books, because if this was his first book or the first Abercrombie book he'd written, I wouldn't like read a scene and be like, hey, this is the same character beat that you did with this other character. This is one of the things that makes Bajol so impressive is she has so many characters, and I've never once for one moment thought to myself like, hey, you're doing this character beat that you already did with this other character. And I'm starting to think Joe just doesn't quite have the range. Like, he writes the characters he's good at very well, but we're just starting to see some character beats repeat. And it was kind of one of those where it's like, you know, in the first law, you can kind of be like, look, this is like a deliberate mirroring of these character arcs. And I'm starting to be like, Joe, do you not know how to write enough character arcs to keep writing new characters for the next decades? Like, I'm a little worried. Which is kind of unfair because it's like, you know, on its own, that flaw in the Devils is just as equally a flaw in the First Law trilogy. Like, if you read them out of order, that wouldn't be a criticism I had of the Devils. And then I'd read the First Law trilogy and I'd be like, you know, this kind of feels the same as some of the beats. I've read this before. I've read this scene from you before, Joe. But it was still grand time. And Joe, like, he's a very good descriptive writer in terms of like how he just makes scenes feel visceral. Flowers of Ashnoi by Louis McMaster Bujold. So obviously this is a Vorkoskin book. So as you can expect, it's going to go into mediocre. It's mid. It's incredibly mid. No one cares about Flowers of Ashnoi. This is a novella. Not much of note happens. It's got some good stuff because it's got characters who are written really well. It's got this kind of weird thing where like someone does some really absolutely fucked up, definitely morally unacceptable stuff. And then at the end, it's kind of like, but maybe we shouldn't feel bad for them. And I'm like, no, maybe we should actually feel more bad for them and they shouldn't like be morally responsible. And it's like, no, they suck. They're probably a murderer and guilty of child abuse. But hey, it has scenes with characters who I love, and that gets it into mediocre. But it's my least favorite thing in Vorkoskin, like, by far. Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne. Oh, Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne. Let's start with the positives. I do think John, in terms of character writing, I know I'm now caveating my positives after saying started with the positives, because I don't think he really writes, like, distinctive character voice in that, like, I don't think he actually writes differently from different perspectives in terms of like vocabulary. But he does differentiate the decisions that his characters make, where you get the sense of like, hey, if this character was put in this position, like, I'm sure the various characters would all make a different decision in that scenario. Also has some cool world building stuff. It has the part with the big snake on the cover is pretty awesome. And the follow-up of that is pretty awesome. Now I'm going to go through the negatives. So the main problem with The Fury of the Gods, in my opinion, is that it's an action book. And I don't think the action is good. Which, as you can imagine, Kat, are you trying to... Okay, whatever. My cat wants me to pay attention to her instead of recording the stream. But, you know, she's valid for that because she's a cat and therefore the most important. But a lot of the actions that is described either feels very low stakes or literally doesn't make physical sense. Where, like, someone will have their hands bound and then they will do something physically impossible to do with their hands bound. And I'll be like, oh, they must have like gotten out of their hands being bound. Next scene. And then the next scene, it's like, but my hands were still bound. And I'm like, you just dual wielded and did this. Like, what are we doing? There also is definitely the sense of, I think there is an instance of someone cutting through chainmail, but armor is generally more useful in John Gwynne's books than other books, and he deserves credit for that. Hello and welcome. And there's also just The named characters yes, hello, you're walking in front of my screen now. Hi. The main characters so clearly have plot armor, and the non-main characters so clearly don't have plot armor. Where there will be like there's an action scene that I'm thinking about in particular where one side is like almost all main characters and one side is like almost all not main characters, and it's supposed to be like a 50-50 super close fight, and like no consequences happen at all, like at all. It's pretty I think it's pretty mid. It's tough, obviously, because obviously Gwyn was going through a lot of stuff when he wrote this book. So I don't necessarily think it's representative, but I just can't lie and say that I think it's particularly good. Like it's just an action book with bad action. I'm sorry. If a Mission Impossible had bad action, I'd be like, that's a bad movie. Yeah. Or like if a John Wick movie had bad action, I'd be like, that's not a good John Wick movie. Okay. The Green Mile by Stephen King. This was also on the TBR competition. So this is kind of split into two main plots, which one is like if you read the back of the Green Mile, one is the plot of that. And that stuff is all really, really awesome. And then there's a plot of this man has the most annoying coworker in the history of the universe. And I just didn't find that second plot as compelling. So even though like the main plot of this book I thought was really awesome, it did get dragged down. There's just a bunch of scenes where I was just like, I'm sorry, I don't care. So it's going here. Yeah, Blackwater's awesome. Oh, Blackwater's good. Okay, Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This is a book that I was like, this is a fantasy book, right? And I'm like, I think technically it could not be a fantasy book, but it's a historical fiction set in Spain. And there are three books that I just like think about the reading experience as very similar. Shadow of the Torturer meets Name of the Wind. I don't think it really reads like either of those. Maybe more Name of the Wind. Yes, meow cat. I'm sorry. I'm in the middle of something. Can we not meow at me ever? You nap 21 hours a day. Can the next hour of now be napping, please? Okay. Do you like stories within stories? Because Shadow of the Wind has stories within stories. There's an in-world book called The Shadow of the Wind, written by a dude, and then that has a certain story that is described very early because the main character reads The Shadow of the Wind, the in-world book, and then the author of The Shadow of the Wind like ends up being very mysterious. And he had, a life similar to the plot of The Shadow of the Wind. And then also our main character gets a plot similar to The Shadow of the Wind. And it's all in a book that we're reading called Shadow of the Wind. So the plot of The Shadow of the Wind happens like 4 times in The Shadow of the Wind. Well, Ben, what you have to consider is try to like stories within stories more. Have you considered that? I'm sorry. That is a valid preference to have. It's just one I do not share. But it's because it's like it's not the exact same plot all 4 times. It's got great like a huge appeal of this book is just the writing is really pretty and good. Like I'm not gonna lie, prose wise, it's just really, really good. And you just read lines and you're like, damn, this man writes pretty. So yeah, it's really awesome. It's very good. I'm putting it like I don't know which I like more between this and The Book Thief. In terms of like vibe of being about a younger character in a historical setting who with like some really good narration and like not necessarily any characters that are among my favorite ever, although there's the one guy in Shadow of the Wind, I forget his name, but he's hilarious and he's pretty awesome. Crap, what was the guy's name? I should have checked before I did this. Anyway, this, The Book Thief, and Boy's Life are all similar in terms of how much I enjoy them and why I enjoy them. I think I like Shadow of the Wind more. It's really close. Anyway, next up, Song of Achilles. Hey, Ben showed up just in time to watch me talk about the book he picked for the TBR competition. Although he's missed, you also picked 11/22/63 and Dogs of War. Anyway, Song of Achilles. This is we do a little Iliad retelling, and it's good. I read this early in the year. I have to admit, it's not super memorable. Now, there is some kind of weird stuff with how it's an Achilles retelling, because the version of Achilles in this is like a much more sensitive person than like Iliad Achilles. And a bunch of the plot of this book takes place before the plot of the Iliad. So it's like, this is a coherent character. It's just a different Achilles. But then like the plot of the Iliad needs to happen. And it's kind of weird because the Achilles is very different from like actual Achilles, but whatever. I enjoyed the main relationship with this and reading it, but it didn't stand out and I don't like remember it that well. So I'm just going to put it below Lies Weeping. The Stars, My Destination. This is a crazy book. The Stars, My Destination. This is an insane, crazy, pulpy book with shockingly interesting world building. So this is about a dude. He's on a derelict ship and he's just like stuck in a room. Every week it like runs out of oxygen and he has to go get a new thing of oxygen and he barely has time. And if he messes up getting the new thing of oxygen, he'll die. So he's having a bad time. He's been here for a while. And another ship comes by and comes up to him and he's like, I'm rescued. I'm saved. Yes. And then the ship just leaves and doesn't rescue him. And he becomes too angry to die. And he shouts, Vorga, Vorga, I'll kill you, filthy. I'll kill you, filthy. Truly the best line, like unironically good in context. I know it sounds terrible, but I have to warn you, if you read this book, you might tell people, you might like gain the urge to type I'll kill you, filthy into conversations on Discord. This is a thing that can happen. And the world building is based on basically, it's in the near-ish future, and people basically discovered like the humans have the capacity to teleport, just like an internal capacity that can be like learned. And how this affects the world building is like really well thought out. It clearly inspired Terra Ignota in some ways. The women characters in this book are roughly what you would expect from an extremely pulpy sci-fi novel. Now, I will give credit where credit is due. They do have agency, the women characters. It's more just the writing of the relationship between women and men is not very good. I'm just going to say that. But like, also the ending is completely crazy. And it's kind of one of those endings where it's like, I don't know if it makes sense, but the book is so pulpy and has the vibe of, I don't know if I'm fine with Foyle being a completely like messed up moral character. Foyle is, but yeah, some of the relationship writing is like kind of iffy. But anyway, it's a good book. I don't know if the ending makes sense, but it puts you in the mood and the vibe where you don't really care if it like actually logically makes sense. And it works really well thematically. So I would say I quite liked it. Yeah. Next, we have The Thousandfold Thought by R. Scott Baker. So I really liked The Darkness That Come Before and weirdly liked The Warrior Prophet way less. This was definitely in between for me. It had so much super interesting stuff with Kellis and crazy world building. Does this have more blow-by-blow action than Fury of the Gods? Maybe. No, probably not. Like, I remember I don't even remember what I said about this. I think it's not a coincidence that this took me a month to read. It is super ambitious, and that is to be respected. But it just has so many scenes where it's like, I don't think this is that enjoy. Okay. Okay, there's also something that just might be a skill issue. Which is there's a lot of the battles where this man will spam a lot of proper names to you and be like, this random faction of this army then did this, and then this specific unit of this army did this, and then this character did this to these people. And maybe some of you are skilled enough to keep track of these proper names. I am not skilled enough to keep track of these proper names. But at the end of the day, one thing that causes problems is like, this is a very high stakes book. And I just don't care what happens to the world. Like, I just don't care if everyone dies. But this is also the book where I started to be like, oh, I see why people say Baker's prose writing is like 10 out of 10. In the two before this, I was like, clearly very good writers. But I think in a vacuum, I would not have pointed out Baker in the first two books as being like, this is one of the most skilled, descriptive prose stylists in the fantasy genre. And I really started to see that here. So I'm going to put it in Quite Liked It, but just with like more pros and more cons than most of the things in Quite Liked It. Okay, The Traitor Baru Cormorant. Quickly, everyone, get your chat out. I feel better. I need to tell me this. If you don't know what this book is about, I want you to know, just based on vibe, title, cover, sci-fi book or fantasy book. Answer now. Nah, okay. Just comment below. Sci-fi book or fantasy book now, before I tell you this is how I need to win an argument with someone from the book. I don't even remember who the argument was with, but this is definitely my attempt to win an argument like nearly a year later. I'm just going to mute Samwise. Nay, you knew this already. Damn it. I said people who don't know. Damn it, Ben. Follow the rules. Anyway, it was fun. Seth Dickinson writes prose exactly averagely among authors. Like, it is exactly good enough that at no point was I like, the prose of this is bad, and at no point was I like, the prose of this is good. Exactly 50th percentile. He does a good job of having I'm going to talk about the stuff I like first, of an empire that is distinct in like, this empire pushes a certain set of like core beliefs and philosophies, and that philosophy feels distinctive. So it feels like a distinct empire, which is cool. And it does long-term setup and payoff quite well in a way that doesn't undercut the rest of the book. Now, the downside is I just, again, didn't really care what happened to the side characters. Like, it just, nothing stood out. There's also some weird vocabulary use, which I guess this counts as prose. There's a bunch of like econ stuff, and I guess technically he could be like, this is just what fiat currency means. But okay, this is going to be for the econ people, which, I mean, I'm not that much of an econ person. I basically just, when I went to school for economics, just learned how to make fun of economists. It's a big deal when the fiat currency is no longer actually backed by gold, which fiat currency is almost definitionally money that is not backed by a physical resource. So it was just a very strange choice to like use a word that means and just have it mean exactly the opposite of what it means. So think of whatever your area of study is, take a specific vocabulary word and pretend the author used that word a lot of times and they just decided it means literally the exact opposite of what it means. This has annoyed me. But it just didn't stand out that much. So that's why it's going in pretty good, I guess, at the bottom. Tough Voyaging by George Martin. Tough Voyaging is... Ooh, is it really good? Tough Voyaging is pretty damn good because I read it after Dreams Underfoot, and my immediate reaction was, damn, George is good. Like, George just does character and plot and setting so well, where I like the first. This is a collection of like short stories, and I like the first story the most. And then I think it gets a bit repetitive, but then like pulls things back. There is one thing though, where like there's a reoccurring plot where there's like one world that gets is a sci-fi book. There's one world that gets multiple like stories about it, and they're just the stupidest people of all time. And it's just kind of like tough keeps being surprised by them being the stupidest people of all time. And it feels like I'm maybe not supposed to believe that they're the stupidest people of all time, but they're just the stupidest people literally in the history of the universe, which is mildly unfortunate. But man, like I thought I was going to get 5 stars after the first story. I'm going to put it. Ooh, do I like it more than Dogs of War, though? I think I'm going to put it in between Dogs of War and The Devils. Winter Fair Gifts. I'm not going to talk about that much. It's a novella, but unlike Flowers of Vashnoy, it's a good novella. It's probably better than Falling Free. I don't remember it that much. Written on the Dark by Guy Gavriel Kay. Last new release of this thing, which is by my second favorite author of all time. So had very high expectations. This was a 5-star prediction. This was on the scale of Guy Gavriel Kay books, I think like below average, which means I'd put it like here. It was still really good. The second half especially was extraordinarily good. Really, the first half, it was just like, if I read it by most authors, I'd just be like, this is a really extraordinarily solid novel. But because it's Guy Gavriel Kay, I was just like, no, he's working on more. No, the weird thing is it wasn't an awesome year of new releases. Like it should have been. I was like Glenn Cook, Ken Liu, Brandon Sanderson, Christopher Rocchio, Guy Gavriel Kay. And like none of them sucked. Don't get me wrong. But they were just like all a little bit worse than I expected them to be. Like I think Written on the Dark is a bottom third Guy Gavriel Kay book. And Shadows Upon Time is a bottom third Sun Eater book. And then Lies Weeping is my least favorite Black Company, barely. And then Isles of the Ember Dark, I guess, is about average for like a non-Stormlight Cosmere book, but probably below average for that. And then All That We See or Seem is my least favorite Ken Liu book. And it's just like none of them exceeded my expectations, and it was frustrating. There's still hope for No Life Forsaken, and 12 Months comes out this year. But for the year of 2025, which is now over, they were all mildly and The Devils. Anyway, Written on the Dark, like the first 9 chapters, I was just like, this is just a solid book. But because it's Guy Gavriel Kay, I was like, why has this not blown my mind yet? And then like, I think the second half is really good. It does some really fantastically interesting history bending. It has one of the best epilogues that you will read. But also, like, the epilogue is pretty blatantly reliant on nostalgia, but it's really, really good nostalgia. So fair play to him. He wrote the Serentine Mosaic, so he should be able to have Cash and A Brightness Long Ago and a bunch of other books. So nostalgia go burr. This is one of the advantages of a standalone. Like, coming down the stretch, going into the climax of the story, I was very nervous because I did not know who would live and who would die. Like when things happened, I was like, oh my God, is this person going to die? And so it had a level of tension that was extremely respectful. Okay, so this is my new reads list. We'll jump back to the top and pick an actual book of the year when we do the awards. But I reasonably bell curved it. There's a pretty solid gap between all of these 4 and I Who Have Never Known Men. So they definitely stand out, and they're all very close. Yes, this was so good. The emoji just showed up as a square for me. So, yeah. All right. Next, we're switching it up to this because I read quite a few books this year. I also reread a lot of books. I think of my 52 books or 54 books, like 20 something were rereads. A lot of these were audio, a few were physical. The Mad Ship, A Storm of Swords, A Feast for Crows, and A Dance with Dragons was physical. The rest is audio. So you can see we have this square. Vertically is just how good I think the book is after reading it. Now you're going to note none of them are going to be bad, because if it was bad, I wouldn't have reread them. But the left to right axis is like just how my opinion changed compared to the last time I read it. So as an example, if I were to read Assassin's Fate again, and it was still my favorite book of all time, it would be in the middle in all-time favorite. So top right is not necessarily better than top middle, because some books are just like already my favorite ever, basically. So this is in a random order. But I am going to reverse the order of the Song of Ice and Fires and do A Storm of Swords first. Now, I did a live show for Storm of Swords, and it was all gushing. I really, really liked the Storm of Swords. So as you can imagine, it's not here. I really, really liked A Storm of Swords the last time I read it, though, because it's A Storm of Swords. This is self-explanatory. It's one of the best fantasy books ever. But I definitely liked it distinctly more this time and grew to appreciate it more. So it improved a pretty solid amount and is one of my favorite books of all time. Now, not quite in contention for, but very close. So we're putting it here. Feast for Crows, on the other hand, I do not like as much as A Storm of Swords, but I still think is a very good book. But the time before I read Feast for Crows, I was like struggling. I was like, why do I care? I was much younger. And I was like, why do I care about all these people? Where are the people who I care about? Who cares about The Wandering? So it's, I think, in contention for the most improved any book has been on Reread, with like Fellowship and Assassin's Apprentice. So I'm going to put it all the way vastly improved and like very, very good. A Dance with Dragons, I like slightly less than A Feast for Crows, but it improved more on my last read, still more than A Dance with Dragons. So we're going to put it more than A Storm of Swords, sorry. So we're going to put it like here, as improve in between the two in terms of how much they improved, probably closer to Storm. And then like slightly worse than Feast. I have no idea if this format is actually good. We're doing this for the first time. Okay, Battleground by Jim Butcher. So, Changes has been my favorite Dresden Files book for a long, long, long time. And on my reread of Battleground, I was like, you know, I think Battleground is my favorite Dresden book. And this has ended up not being like a short-term thought. And I've decided Battleground by Jim Butcher is my favorite novel in the Dresden Files, and that I like it more than Changes. It not only just has insanity and crazy action, I think in terms of like, there is such a feeling of Battleground that all the side characters are living their own life outside of what we see from Harry's story. It has ridiculously good characterization with like a character that I can't really talk about. So Battleground, the thing is, was barely behind Changes. So thematically, that feels like a big difference of enjoyment, but in reality, it's only slightly improved. And I like it slightly less than A Storm of Swords. Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie. This was on audio. I don't think it really changed my opinion of Before They Are Hanged. It's my favorite of the 3 first Law books, but I like it less than 2 of the Age of Madness books. Joe writes really, really good perspective characters and has well-written side characters, but not as good as the main perspective characters. Yeah, I mean, it's. I think I like it about as much as Feast and Dance, but it basically just stayed like the same. Changes, I kind of already talked about, but we're just going to put, like, it, my opinion didn't change. Changes I have read like 12 times. So there's just a very limited amount that my opinion of Changes can change. Haha, get wrecked. So there's a very limited amount that my opinion of changes can change. It was only like my third or fourth time reading Battleground, so there's just less room to move, so it was never going to change. This is basically the same with Cold Days, which, you know what, actually, I'll move. Yeah, they're kind of just overlapping, but that's okay. I've read Dresden a lot. The Dresden doesn't need to be visible. Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. So this was interesting because when I read it, it was my first Bujold book, and I read a bunch of Vorkos again, and I kind of forgot how good Chalion was. So I don't know if my opinion changed much from like when I first read it, but on reread over the time, I'd forgotten how good it was, and it reminded me. I think I liked it slightly more on reread, and I like it like this much. Less than Cold Days, more than Feast and Dance. Demon in White. So I read this on audiobook, and it did have mildly unfortunate timing, and I was alternating Terra Ignota and Sun Eater. And also, I read Shadows Upon Time while I was listening to this. And so, like, there was a retcon in Shadows Upon Time that then was more noticeable because I read about the retcon in Demon in White. So Demon in White, I like more than most of these books, but I did like less on reread. I think the action, plot, character, world building stuff is as good as I remember. I don't think the thematic exploration is as interesting as I thought it was the first time. So I'm going to put it very similar in terms of how much I like it to Cold Days, but as like, you know, definitely liking it. It was one of my, no, this is I'll talk to you about it later. It's hard to describe. This is more serious than the Crispin retcon. Anyway, that's going here. Ghost Story, should I have even included so Ghost Story is the Dresden book that has historically improved the most on reread. Like if we went from first ever read to now, it would be like over here in terms of level of improvement. But the last time, like we finally hit the peak of how much I like Ghost Story, where I'm not cool enough to think it's my favorite Dresden book, unfortunately. I think there are some plot things that are handled a little clunkily, but also the emotional through lines in character writing is so strong. We're just going to cover up before they're hanged. I like it less than Dance and Feast, so we're going to have it like here. Howling Dark, kind of similar to Demon in White. I like the second half just as much as I did the first time. One thing is, the first time I read it, like everyone is confused when they read the first section of Howling Dark, and it's kind of just like, oh, I was just disoriented. I now just don't think the first 25% of Howling Dark, I just think is worse than the rest of the book pretty comfortably, where I just don't think the character dynamics is that interesting. It does have the cool thing with like the horror elements, so it's not like it isn't good, but I did end up lower on Howling Dark as well. Even though Howling Dark is like better, I still like more than Ghost Story. Probably because like there wasn't just a general vibe decrease. There's like a specific section where I'm like, nah, this section is like, I think less good than although I kind of had that with the first bit of Demon in White. And then the second bit of Demon in White, like goes so hard and is so good. Okay, we'll put it just like maybe like here, but I still like it more than Before They're Hanged, but less than Chalion. Let's spread these out a little. Okay, so we want it above Before They Are Hanged and below Curse of Chalion. Curse of Chalion actually should just be higher. It's closer to Cold Days than it is to Dance with Dragons. Okay, there we go. Peace Talks by Jim Butcher. Peace Talks is still good. I don't think I liked it more or less. Maybe, but it's worse than Ghost Story. Okay. We're moving on. The Dresden books we're flying through. Perhaps the Stars by Ada Palmer. So I finished this reread yesterday. Perhaps the Stars was my favorite sci-fi book of all time going into like after my first read. It was a lot better on Reread, and I think is my third or fourth favorite book of all time. In terms of actual rating, it probably improved a similar amount to Dance, like less than Dance. But in terms of how I feel about it, I'm putting it up here. Perhaps the Stars is absolutely ridiculous. It's completely singular. The amount of layers of narrative and genius that all work together just doesn't make sense. There were like 6 chapters in this book where someone was like, that's my favorite chapter in fiction. I'd just be like, yeah, that makes sense. Oh my God, it's good. So I did the graphic audio. I think the graphic audio is extremely good. There will be things that you might miss in the graphic audio. Like a lot of the time, people are speaking like a weird mix of languages, and obviously, like they're not going to speak in. So there's stuff that you will miss, but I do think the voice acting for the graphic audio was extremely good, and they are able to capture like. I know Ada Palmer was very involved in the production of this graphic audio and had a lot to say. And I know because she said this at Worldcon. And even though there might be some scenes that are different, there's a lot like it's just really good in a slightly different way. Also, like there's a actual plot reason for this that I'll let you come to, but a lot of the chapters in Perhaps the Stars are written, not a lot, a lot of like bits, passages of Perhaps the Stars are written in iambic pentameter, for reasons that you'll find out. And that just makes them more satisfying to listen to. Like they just have a very nice rhythm to listen to because of that fact. So yeah, I think if you like audiobooks, I can recommend the graphic audio extremely enthusiastic. Oh yeah. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You'll get to it. But iambic pentameter sounds good, right? Like that's why it was a thing with Shakespeare and for like plays. So when it's written just in like paragraphs. But if you were to take those paragraphs and like move them into verse, you'd be like, oh wait, those entire like pages are in perfect iambic pentameter. Don't worry about it. Ada Palmer's doing shit, okay? Like you're not, however much shit you think Ada Palmer is doing more shit than that. I promise. Yeah, Perhaps the Stars is such a crazy novel. Just what was she cooking? We're moving. It's so good. Okay. So Seven Surrenders. Seven Surrenders is also wildly good. Seven Surrenders I liked about the same as I liked it the first time. If you go back to last year, I had Perhaps the Stars and Seven Surrenders really close. I gave them the same score. I think Perhaps the Stars is obviously better than Seven Surrenders now in hindsight. But Seven Surrenders does have an incredible density of interesting things. Incredible world building. And is just written so well. But it didn't, I probably liked it slightly more. But I probably like it less than Battleground and Changes, but more than Cold Days. So we'll put it like here. Skin Game, there's too many Dresden books. They're all blocked up. Skin Game is blocking off Cold Days because it's a little better than Cold Days. It's a little worse than Changes, in my opinion. Very close to Seven Surrenders, but maybe slightly worse. Small Favor, we're kind of okay. You know what? Actually, obviously it's not there. I'm just putting it here as a placeholder. Small Favor, I will say I've gone back and forth between Small Favor and Turncoat quite a few times. And going into this read, I thought I liked Small Favor clearly more. And then I liked Small Favor maybe slightly less and Turncoat slightly more on this reread. So we'll put this like very similar to Chalian, I guess. And then, oh God, that means Turncoat just needs to block Chalian. Okay, whatever. We're just going to put Turncoat like this, so you can see Curse of Chalion. Turncoat should almost just be on, and maybe Curse of Chalion's better. I don't know. The Lord of the Rings. I did this on audio, Andy Serkis audio, very good audiobooks. Compared to the first time I read it, they would be all the way over here and vastly improved. But I did still like Lord of the Rings more than I liked it last time. Probably didn't improve as much as Storm of Swords. And I don't like it quite as much as Storm of Swords. But we're going to put it like Lord of the Rings are 7 surrenders. Probably about even. 7 surrenders. The Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. I did not do the audiobook for this. I listened to the sample. They're getting redone, but only for UK people, not North America. Boo. I read this physically. It's incredible. Every time I'd read a chapter, I'd be like, how is it that incredible? It's Live Ship. It's my favorite series ever. It is my least favorite of the 3 novels of Live Ship. My opinion didn't really change. It's just going like, I think I have this literally next to A Storm of Swords on my top book list. So I'm going to try and put it exactly even with A Storm of Swords, but just like directly in the middle. And then last off is The Will to Battle, which was my least favorite book in Terra Ignota and was the most improved on Reread, and is going to go like in a similar spot to Feast for Crows, where maybe I like it ever so slightly more, but it didn't improve. It didn't improve as much. Probably it's closer in terms of amount of improvement to like Dance, but like here. So Will to Battle, partially because I knew what to look for here. I missed a lot of the really interesting stuff that came from the frame narrative. And I think this isn't a spoiler to say. So the frame narrative for Terra Ignota is the first 2 books, it says right away at the start, are like an in-world text written about 7 days. And they, like if I open To Like the Lightning, it gives a bunch of warnings at first, which is like who wrote it and a bunch of parameters and requests of certain parties. Like they had to get a bunch of permission from people to write it. And they have to like warn you about all the stuff in there. And all the people who approved this got to like change stuff. So it's a censored account of the first of a 7-day stretch. The Will to Battle. Well, one, as the Will to Battle is happening, those 2 are being written, which is kind of interesting, but it's for historical record. So the Will to Battle and perhaps the Stars are nearly completely unedited by any party. So like there will be characters who show up who people treat like they've been doing stuff. Well, a character. And you'll be like, damn, my memory's so bad. Like, I forget who this character is. But you didn't forget who that character is. That character got censored from the first 2 novels by an in-world person. There's a bunch of really cool interaction between what type of in-world text the 2 halves are. And also that like the events of To Like the Lightning and 7 Surrenders happened, and then they were like in world written after the fact. We're like put everything together. Will to Battle and perhaps the Stars, like Will to Battle is being written by the characters later in the Will to Battle, and also they're writing To Like the Lightning and 7 Surrenders. And then perhaps the Stars is being written like as it happens. And so like it always says the date that is being written about and the date it was written. And sometimes like it'll be like, yeah, I wrote about yesterday. And sometimes it'll be like, oh my God, completely chaotic shit has been happening for the last 2 months. So like now I got to recap the last 2 months to you because I haven't had a chance to write. It's just like she just plays on the hardest. She writes on the hardest difficulty, and it just works so well. So this is obviously like I didn't reread books that I don't like. So it's kind of a boring scatter plot, and like, yeah, nothing is, I guess something could be down here because there could be a book that I thought I liked and then I reread and I'm like, no, this is terrible. But like this is almost impossible to happen. No, I mean, I guess there could be a book that I thought was horrible and someone convinced me to reread, and I'm like, it's still bad, but not as bad. This corner is just like, why did I reread that? Because, like, if it's as bad as it can be and vastly improved, where did it come from? So, fundamentally, kind of a weird way of doing this, but I think it was kind of fun. You guys can let me know in the comments if you want the reread scatter plot to be a yearly thing. So now, back to just me. We have awards to give out for various things. Because this is live, I don't have fancy graphics. I'm gonna just say things. But I have 5 awards to give out, and the first award is the Character of the Year. This will be given to the character who was most interesting and significant to my reading journey last year. Now, I did not do these awards last year, but I will say who would have been the defending winner last year for each one. So last year, if I'd done this, Miles Vorkosigan would have been my Character of the Year. My nominees for this year are Eleanor Caskey from Blackwater by Michael McDowell. Everyone cheer for Eleanor Caskey. She may be a river lady, but we love her anyways. We have Ekaterine Voisoson, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, from the Vorkosigan Saga by Louis McMaster Bujold. Very good. We have Miles Vorkosigan from the Vorkosigan Saga by Louis McMaster Bujold. Give a hand. Our defending winner. We have The Unnamed Protagonist from I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. Everyone give a round of applause. We don't know her name. We have Hadrian Marlowe from Shadows Upon Time by Christopher Rocchio. You know, he could have won this. Could he have won this in any year? And no, the problem is I did in one year read like Demon in White. Maybe in the year I read Kingdoms of Death and Ashes of Man, he might have won. What was my book of the year that year? Lord of Emperors? No, he wouldn't have won Character of the Year. It would have been from I read the Dandelion Dynasty. Anyway, Hadrian Marlowe he's been a nominee. He would have been a nominee. This would be like his 4th time being nominated. Can he get his first win? And our last nominee is William Stoner from Stoner. Everyone give Stoner a round of applause. He needs it. Can he accomplish something? And the winner is Miles Vorkosigan, repeating as champion. I didn't really feel it was fair to include rereads, but also like, then does Kenneth win because I reread The Mad Ship? Then does Harry Dresden just win? I read like a lot of Dresden novels most years. Then like, you know, if I reread Tawny Man, does Fitz just like, I read one Tawny Man book a year. Does Fitz just win 3 years in a row? Also, Miles Vorkosigan is my 3rd favorite fictional character, and I read like 7 books about him. I'm going to be completely honest. This was not even a little bit close. No one else even had a slightest chance at all. Miles won really easily 2 years in a row. He's the GOAT. Yeah, Kenneth actually wouldn't have won because Miles would have won. No one else was winning. Okay. Next, we have the new release of the year. Crap, I forget what new releases I read last year. What would have won? Oh, I know what would have won. The winner of this last year was the ever controversial Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. Everyone give an applause to our defending champion. The nominees are Written on the Dark by Guy Gavriel Kay. Everyone give a round of applause to another novel by Guy Gavriel Kay. The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. Yes, very funny. Jacob of the Thorn. Dude's good at not dying. Shadows Upon Time by Christopher Rocchio. Also would have been a nominee last year with Disquiet Gods. Probably would have been runner-up last year. And lastly, hoping to repeat, Isles of the Emberdark by Brandon Sanderson. Now, obviously, this one I just ranked the books, so we can see whether this is legitimate or if the voting is rigged. The votes are coming in, and the winner is Written on the Dark by Guy Gavriel Kay. Everyone give a round of applause. He's probably going to release another book in 3 years, and he'll probably win that year too. Even though on the Guy Gavriel Kay standpoint, this was kind of disappointing. Everything was kind of disappointing. So, but if everyone is kind of disappointing, the dude who writes the best is the best when he's kind of disappointing. I think we're going to get Fire in the Dark by Ada Palmer in 2027. So that'll be interesting. Okay. Next one is the author of the year. Now this, thank you, Ben. Ben declared me a Guy Gavriel Kay hater a couple weeks ago. But then he put 7 books ahead of Children of Earth and Sky. So who's the real hater? Both of us. So author of the year, this is not just new releases. This is inclusive of how what the author did affected my year. So for example, like I talked to some authors at Worldcon. That counts. Oh crap, I just realized. I forgot about an author who I didn't read, who realistically probably should just win. I'll tell you who got robbed after this. So the nominees are Stephen King for writing 11/22/63 and The Green Mile, both of which were read by me. Louis McMaster Bujold for writing Komar, A Civil Campaign, Winter Fair Gifts, Diplomatic Immunity, Captain Vorpatrol's Alliance, Flowers of Vashnoy, Cryo Burn, and Gentleman Jolie and the Red Queen. That's a lot of books. George R.R. Martin for appearing at Worldcon and for the rereads of A Storm of Swords, A Feast for Crows, A Dance with Dragons, and for reading A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Michael McDowell for writing Blackwater. And Ada Palmer for writing Seven Surrenders, Will to Battle, and Perhaps the Stars. And also for being the most interesting person at Worldcon in terms of their reading and hosting live events. And the winner is Ada Palmer. Congratulations, everyone, Ada Palmer. Now, this might sound ridiculous, but you can go ask Kyle, and he will be like, the light in my eyes changed after Ada Palmer did an event for Worldcon. She just posted about it on Discord, and then like everyone in the Terra Ignota Discord went, and she just like talked about Terra Ignota in full spoilers faction for like 2 hours, and I was a changed man after that event. So Kyle can comment if he watches this 2-hour stream and sees this part and goes, yep, that makes sense. But there was actually a robbery here because someone else definitely should have won if we consider all contributions. And that is that Zach Argyle should have won because Zach Argyle let me stay in his house for a week during Worldcon. And no, this was just like literally her just being like, invite us to a table and chatted with Terra Ignota fans for like 3 hours and just like fielded questions and talked about them. Ada Palmer is a cool person. But Zach Argyle let me live in his house while I was at Worldcon, and like when my car battery died, drove me to the mechanic so I didn't get stranded in Seattle. And was like a generally phenomenal host. And as cool as Ada Palmer is, she didn't stop me from being stranded in Seattle and save me thousands of dollars in accommodations for going to Worldcon. So like, yeah, Zach Argyle probably got robbed and probably should have won on that basis. So shout out to Zach Argyle for being the GOAT. Second, I have to let a delivery in. But we're robbing him and we're giving it to Ada Palmer because it was a spiritual experience. Okay. Next up, the big one. Oh, no, not the big one. The next up is the reread of the year. Obviously this was just covered in the previous ones, but there's two factors. There's what improved the most and also which was my favorite. And the nominees are A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin, A Feast for Crows by George R.R. Martin, A Dance with Dragons by George R.R. Martin, The Will to Battle by Ada Palmer, Perhaps the Stars by Ada Palmer, Battleground by Jim Butcher, and The Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. Everyone give a round of applause for our nominees. This was a very close one. This was the one where, the votes came in. They had to be recounted 7 times. But the winner is A Feast for Crows by George R.R. Martin. Ada Palmer almost stole it at the very end. But at the end of the day, it is hard to beat taking a book that I was lukewarm on and going to, well, that's an awesome, completely, really good book. So Feast pulls it through. And then Storm of Swords also got quite a few votes, and Will to Battle got quite a few votes. Yeah. And lastly, we have, we're going back to our old setup. We have the Book of the Year, which, as you can see, there are 4 nominees. We're going to create a tier above this of Book of the Year. So the nominees are A Civil Campaign by Louis McMaster Bujold, for being an absolute delight, having some of the best character writing that I've ever read, and maybe making me smile more than any other book this year. We have Blackwater by Michael McDowell, an incredible family drama that I've now recommended to a lot of people, with just incredible character writing and family dynamics, with a little twinge of horror that made it truly excellent. We have 11/22/63 by Stephen King, a 1,000-page book that I read in like 2 days and completely flipped my opinion on one of the most famous authors ever. And we have Stoner by John Williams, a short book about an uneventful man that I could not stop thinking about. And the winner is 11/22/63 by Stephen King. 11/22/63 is my book of the year. It was pretty close. I actually like ranking these 3 is a lot harder, but 11/22/63 is my favorite. The entire plot line was just so ridiculous. Now, granted, I think you would have been pretty happy with A Civil Campaign as well. I actually don't know how I would rank these 3. Maybe like this, or like this, or like this. I don't know. Probably like this. Maybe like this. I don't know. Whatever. But 11/22/63 is my book of the year. So that, everyone, was an hour and 43-minute long stream. I hope you have enjoyed my end of year stream. It was fun to go through these with all of you here cheering for certain things to win the nomination. Maybe I'll prepare for it better and do it next year as well. Let me know in the comments. Do you prefer this, or should I just not overthink it and do a top 10 favorite novels and a bottom 5? The bottom 5 is kind of weird though, because I kind of just avoided books that I didn't like. And the top 10 is like a third of the books that I read for the first time. We will keep track of the award winners and see if anyone repeats. Fortunately, it seems like we have no more books from Miles Vorkosigan. He will have won twice in a row, but he will not win a third time. Unless Bujold releases another Miles. Oh, but there's going to be a Dresden book next year. So Harry Dresden will make his claim for favorite book of the year. Lovely to have you all chat. Various people throughout. Feels like it ends with One Lost Beyond the Wall and Books with Genghis Khan. I'm surprised I didn't get yelled at more for my opinions, but you know what? I'm okay with that. Have a happy new year, everyone. Have a good 2026 in terms of both reading and non-reading, but especially have a good year if you read all the books that I want you to. I got to be a little bit selfish with my wishes. Thanks for being here. Have a good day, everyone.